this video, I'll be covering why people give up their US citizenship, as well as go over why I gave up my US citizenship. So basically, to start off, why would someone want to give up their US citizenship? The primary reason people oftentimes think of is taxes. They figure, oh, people give up their US citizenship to avoid taxes or reduce their taxes. And while that can be a factor for some people, it's not the major factor that causes people to give up their citizenship. Ultimately, there's many ways around the US tax system where you don't have to pay that much tax, as well as generally when people leave and give up their citizenship, they end up paying tax somewhere anyways. So really, people usually don't make such a big step to give up their citizenship over simply paying a little extra in taxes. People usually want to renounce their citizenship because they feel at odds with the United States or its government, and generally a lot of different policy decisions it makes. Sometimes it's not directed at the government, but more towards its society. Some people have a disagreement with how the culture in the United States is going, and for this reason, as well as many others I'll cover in this video, they just do not feel like they're American or really belong as an American citizen anymore. Other times, they just simply do not appreciate the extra complexities that come into living abroad as a US citizen. These can include things like banking as well as investing. A lot of different investments you cannot invest in if you're an American citizen without getting special accreditation and becoming an accredited investor. As well as opening a bank account in many developing jurisdictions is extremely difficult because the local banks will have to comply with the United States regulations, and most of them simply are not willing to do this, not only because the regulations are quite strict and invasive, but they don't really care to do this for just 1, 2, maybe 10 clients that they might have from the United States. So they just simply decide to not associate with US people. This makes banking and living in certain developing countries extremely hard. And while none of these things necessarily will cause someone to want to give up their citizenship or actually go through with it, all of these little things combined will just make it where certain people, like myself, do not feel like the benefits of being an American citizen outweigh the cost, and thus they want to give it up. For example, with myself, I gave up my US citizenship for a variety of reasons. One of the primary ones was whenever I thought about going back to the US, it was always as a tourist. The thought never crossed my mind to seriously go live there again. I would think of it, and I'd want to go back and see family. I still do. I plan to go see family sometime. As well as I plan to go do a hike, like the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail. I enjoy hiking. The US has beautiful national parks, but that's what I'd be going for if I went back to the US. It'd be to see family or to do tourist activities. Because I didn't travel around the US much, and it has beautiful nature. But I would never actually go back and live there, so I don't really need to be a citizen to do those things. And you might say, well, maybe in the future you would decide to live in the United States. That's reasonable to say, but I went back there. I was kind of forced to go back during COVID. Basically all the other countries shut down. There was a couple open, but I wanted to see family because I hadn't seen them in a few years, and I went back. After about a week, I couldn't wait to leave. I left a couple weeks later, and I was happy to be in that case. I went to Brazil. Amazing country. To me, I don't ever see myself going and living in the United States again. It's not for me. When I went to see family, I couldn't wait to get out of there, and after a week, 2 weeks, first 2 weeks were great, but then just the little issues that I have with the United States and the way of life there, the issues of walkability, and just generally how some people behave. And it just became so much where I wanted to leave, as well as it reaffirmed that feeling that I do not really belong there, and I do not enjoy living in the United States. So having this feeling where all I'd want to do is tourist things and not really blending in with the culture or enjoying the way of life, quite frankly, I already felt like I wasn't a US citizen. All the way back in, I'd say, probably around 2020. I didn't really, I wasn't sure about it before then, but around 2020, I just felt like there's absolutely no way I'm going to want to live here in the future, and this isn't home to me. I feel more at home in other places I've been at that time. So, for example, here in Thailand, where I am again now, I feel this is more like home. The culture is more similar to what I like. The food's similar. The lifestyle's similar. So yeah, I just didn't really feel like a US citizen already at that point. Part of this is because when I went back to the US in 2020, let's just say I had extra security screening a little too many times. And then I was taken into a back room and questioned. And I'd think, okay, well, it's just random. Like they say it's random, but you don't get random security screening like 4 times in a row simply because you're transiting Europe as well as entering the US. This doesn't really happen naturally. Theoretically, it's possible, odds and everything. However, this doesn't really happen naturally, and the vibe I was getting from the officer that I spoke to and was interviewed by was that this was specifically because of where I've traveled to. So they had an issue with me traveling to Turkey, it seemed like. They had an issue with me staying there for multiple months. They had an issue just broadly with me being in a variety of different countries for months on end without an official real job or source of income. So they just found it incredibly suspicious, and they treated me like, in my opinion, like I wasn't even a US citizen already. Like I was just some foreigner entering the country, and that they were highly suspicious of. So basically, I was never fond of a lot of US aspects of life, from the way the military spending was, the industrial complex around that, to the way the government works, to the way people genuinely prefer to live in the United States. Basically, everything being further apart, living in suburbs, having cars, generally living kind of insular within your own family, not associating too much with the community. These are things I didn't really appreciate. And then when I came back to the US, I was treated badly, like I wasn't a citizen, and these things all like were still present and even stronger in my opinion as I grew and understood things more and understood there were places where it wasn't like this. And just, I felt like this wasn't my home. This wasn't my people. This isn't my country. So at that point, combining it with some other factors and stuff like, complexities dealing with US banking regulations abroad and general investing issues, it just made sense for me to give up my citizenship. Like I already felt like I wasn't a citizen, why not just make it formal? Okay, so while many other folks feel that way, and they share a similar sentiment to me, usually it isn't enough to push them over the edge and actually want to give up their US citizenship. Well, rather actually go through with giving up their citizenship. It was enough for me, however, it isn't for most people. So basically everyone I've met who has ended up giving up their citizenship or intends to has some major gripes outside of just personal feelings towards the US and feelings of belonging. Usually they have some sort of issue from the past or that is holding them back currently. When you combine these feelings of just generally not belonging in the US anymore with the hassles of dealing with banking or investing internationally, or just other issues like having to actually file taxes completely on your own, or just a variety of other reasons I'll cover below, these push people over the edge where they actually go through with renouncing their citizenship. The first main reason that pushes people over the edge and causes them to actually go through with renouncing their citizenship is there's a lot of perverse incentives in the US tax structure, and this has burned a lot of people. Specifically the short-term versus long-term capital gains tax system. This makes people feel forced to hold investments they no longer really believe in, because if they sell now with the short-term capital gains rates, they may be paying 35% of their what they made just to the government. But if they wait just 1 or 2 months longer and get into that long-term capital gains rate, they might only be paying 15%. So this perverse incentive there causes people to hold on to their investments even when they don't believe in them, and oftentimes, pretty much, it seems like all the time, get burned by it. Most people below 40 who have renounced their citizenship seem to have experienced this at least once or twice, and it has built up a lot of animosity. Usually the animosity expires after 1 or 2 years. However, the idea that these perverse incentives don't go away in their mind. They know that they're inhibited in their investing journey or trading journey simply because of the way the tax structure is set up in the US. And it has nothing to do with the tax itself. Many of the people I've met who have renounced for this reason, or this was one of their primary reasons, they're still in jurisdictions where they're taxed on capital gains. However, oftentimes it's taxed at a more flat rate, say 20% across the board, where this is in some cases more than they were paying in the US with the long-term capital gains, or maybe even overall. However, they don't have this perverse incentive in their mind screwing up their investment decisions. So it's not really about the tax itself, it's just about how the structure is set up around the tax system that's causing people to get burned and destroying their capital and building animosity towards the United States and its tax system. To be clear, this has affected me to some degree. In 2017, I made up to, I think it was $120,000. And I wrote it all the way down to $20,000 because I believe it was 3 months shy of hitting long-term capital gains. So I was like, hey, I'll just wait it out. What are the odds crypto's going to go down 30, 40, 50%? Well, the odds were not in my favor, to say the least, and I lost a lot of money. There was a lot of other reasons that were around that situation where I lost money, generally being unknowledgeable, having zero guidance, and a lot of personal family issues that were going on. However, still, nonetheless, it affected me, and it did build animosity, particularly in 2017, 2018, 2019. Around midway through 2019, I stopped really caring and moved on. This is primarily, in my opinion, just because of time and just growing up. That seems to be the case for most other people who have got burned this way. After about 2 to 3 years, they stop really caring, and it doesn't really affect them as they've grown and become more wealthy regardless. However, it still is something there that they remember and that they are acutely aware of in how it affects their investing decisions. So this is one factor why people oftentimes actually go through with renouncing their citizenship, is because they want this worry and this what's causing malinvestment in their life to be gone. And giving up your citizenship is one way to get rid of that. The second main reason I'd say that pushes people over the edge to renounce is regarding investment opportunities. Oftentimes people are denied investment opportunities simply because they're a U.S. citizen, because the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission of the U.S., and basically all the regulations they have and the severe overreach, they're the only country in the world, the United States, and the SEC, they're the only country and regulatory body to pursue people for simply investing in assets in other countries without being accredited and approved by them. It's obscene. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. And it's not just for the investors. They pursue and prosecute the investment, the company itself and the founders of the company itself. This terrifies foreign entities from accepting U.S. customers, even if they are accredited in a lot of cases, because they just don't want to deal with any risk regarding the SEC. They've screwed up investing internationally for U.S. investors in a big way. Likewise, with the previous point, this did affect me in 2017 because I was investing in a lot of ICOs. And once the SEC started to crack down on it a bit, basically all investment opportunities regarding ICOs shut down for American citizens. This ended up costing me quite a bit of money, and a lot of other people I've met who have renounced also were affected by this in 2017, or more so, they are currently affected by this regarding investing in other funds internationally. Similarly to being denied investment opportunities, American citizens are oftentimes denied banking opportunities. This largely is only in developing countries where the banks cannot meet the AML KYC requirements of FinCEN and other regulatory bodies within the US, or they simply do not have the infrastructure set up to accommodate the requirements within those regulations, or in other cases simply because they don't want to deal with providing all this extra nonsense just for a handful of US clients they might have. So it makes doing banking and as a result business in a lot of developing markets quite a bit more difficult. Once again though, this is ridiculous. No other country on earth, as far as I'm aware, does this sort of behavior. No other country requires more or less full reporting of everything going on in a foreign bank account to them. This is just obscene overreach. It's something where it didn't affect me personally, mind you. I didn't really care to bank outside the US at that time. I do now, but I didn't then. But it's just obscene overreach, and there's no reason for this. It's ridiculous. No other country does this, not even Western countries, and it just makes life way too difficult for a lot of Americans living full-time in developing countries. Always having to do banking in the US and wire money over and pick it up at a Western Union or another similar sort of shop, or wire it to their wife's bank account and then get money through that. It makes a lot of things more difficult, and it makes, in some cases, buying property almost impossible for Americans in certain developing countries. So it's another thing I've heard people mention as one of the primary reasons they want to give up their US citizenship, and more so why people have actually given it up. And the fourth main reason, the final reason I'm going to be mentioning in this video, it's one that's quite a bit strange, but one I can kind of understand after my experience that I covered above regarding entering the US in 2020 after traveling for a few years. To briefly cover that again though, I got a lot of extra security screening going through the airports, was pulled aside multiple times and got interviewed when I arrived in the US by an agent who was questioning me regarding why I visited Turkey and other Islamic countries, as well as just generally stayed outside the US for such an extended period of time. Basically, it seems like people who spend a lot of time out of the US on an extended basis, they don't just go on a brief business trip or go somewhere for 1 month vacation and come back to the US, but if they're staying out for multiple years, they seem to always be treated pretty poorly by the US security apparatus, from domestically within the US, as well as anytime they transit Australia or anywhere in Western Europe, Canada. These countries seem to give them a lot of extra screening and questioning and, in my opinion, harassment. And I say this is a US security apparatus because it's primarily in the Five Eyes countries, as well as Europe. This is more or less the US's grounds for dealing with security, and oftentimes people who are going back to the US through there not only get harassed like I did, and lots of security screening, but they also get questioned heavily on arrival in the US. So in my opinion, this is all due to the US's security apparatus. And I'm not saying this is unwarranted. It is kind of suspicious, I guess, to go live outside the US for multiple years at a time. Particularly if you visit Islamic countries or Turkey or whatever, they're quite secular. I understand why the US might be concerned by that, but it still is something most people seem to be quite uncomfortable about if they're living abroad and they experience this, where they just feel unwelcomed, and it's one of the deciding factors that make them want to renounce their citizenship. Because they're already being treated like a foreigner, so why have a US passport? You get all the same crap from agents that a foreigner would get when you're entering the country. Where you're going, what you're doing, why you're in these other countries. You get all the same stuff. So why not just get rid of your citizenship and apply for a visa? Because they're already treating you like that. I'm not sure why this is the case. I guess it's a red flag in their system if you've been outside the country for such a long period of time, or visited a Islamic country like Turkey, or even though they're quite secular, maybe it's a red flag. And so I can kind of understand why they might be doing this, but it just generally makes people feel unwelcomed and like their passport isn't as strong as it's led on to be, and like the US passport isn't as strong as it is on paper because they get so much harassment and poor treatment, in my opinion, as a result of the US. But it also builds like distrust and like makes people feel that unwelcome feeling, like I mentioned before, that I felt. And this causes people to really detach from the country and detach from the identity of being an American, because you're already not being treated like you're an American. You're being questioned like you're a foreigner. Like, why not just give it up, make it official, and like get a visa and go through the process? Because they're already going to ask you where you're going, what you're doing, and why you're in these other places. Like, what's the difference? You're practically having to do all the same process a foreigner would have to do. So yeah, that's like the final main reason I hear people want to give up their citizenship who actually do give up their citizenship. Okay, so a quick disclaimer now. Obviously, this is going to be influenced by my biases and who I associate with, and who I've worked with and who has contacted me. Maybe this is not fully representative of the general community of people who give up their US citizenship. The majority of people are usually Europeans who are accidentally American citizens, and they just never thought of themselves as American. They never even lived in the country, so they're just giving it up officially, but they've never really even identified as American. But I'm really speaking more for the people who lived in the US and decide to expatriate and eventually give up their citizenship. Those are the people I work with, and well, that's who I am. I gave up my citizenship, and I was born in the US, born in Texas, and lived there my whole childhood. And while there are other reasons, of course, different personal reasons and things that depend on the person, these are the primary reasons that always seem to push people over the edge. Usually a combination of these seems to be the people who just want to get out and want to actually give up their citizenship. Most other people are fine with just getting a second passport, like one of the Caribbean programs, or going a residency route and like giving it some extra time to get the second citizenship. And most people are comfortable doing that and never actually giving up their US citizenship. But the people who are and who actually go through with it seem to, like the reasons I covered above, usually they have at least 1, 2, oftentimes 3 of them that really influence their decision and push them over the edge to actually give up their citizenship. And of course, everyone does kind of mention taxes a bit, primarily the burden of filing taxes. The US, it's much more complicated, especially if you're living outside the US, to actually file your taxes, because you're most likely working for yourself or your own business. You might even have multiple businesses. You also have to deal with like foreign banking reporting and just a lot of other nonsense as well, especially if you're paying taxes in a foreign country as well, and you have to do these treaty things. It's just a lot of extra hassle people don't want to deal with, but it's usually not the thing that pushes people over the edge, in my opinion. It's just a confounding factor, just another thing that influences and like encourages them to do so quicker than they otherwise would. But overall, to conclude this video, while most people think people renounce their US citizenship for tax reasons, or primarily tax reasons, that's not really the case. Like, there's plenty of other reasons people renounce their citizenship, and taxes is only one of them, and it's really one of the smaller factors, in my opinion, from what I've seen, that causes people to renounce their US citizenship. As always, if you just have any thoughts or questions about this video, or simply wanted to start a discussion down below, maybe you could say why you're considering renouncing your US citizenship if you are a US citizen, and just provide some extra data points for people down in the comments down below. But with that being said, bye-bye.